The tall golden grasses swayed gently in the late morning breeze, their movement masking the faintest of sounds, yet something fragile stirred beneath their waving stems. A soft, trembling whimper reached the ears of the rangers, so quiet it could have been mistaken for the rustle of wind against dry leaves. They paused, instinctively lowering their voices, the usual rhythm of the savannah seeming to shift in recognition of the small life they had not expected to find. Their trained eyes traced the motion, subtle and uneven, until they discerned the source. A tiny lion cub, barely able to hold itself upright, its coat matted and dulled by the dust and dew. Every muscle in its little body trembled as it pressed its face into the earth, attempting to seek warmth and protection that was not there. Its cries were fragmented, fading, and the stillness around it felt unbalanced, a hollow where a mother's presence should have been. The rangers moved slowly, their steps deliberate, soft against the dry soil. Their presence was measured, not hurried, as they lowered themselves to the cub's level, hands steady and careful. One ranger whispered, "It's okay, girl," the words barely more than air, yet somehow carrying reassurance. The cub flinched at first, a wave of fear passing through its small frame, but the gentle, consistent movements of the humans began to coax it from the edge of panic. Its large eyes, still clouded with exhaustion and confusion, flicked toward them, searching for threat and finding none. The tilt of its head, the quivering ears, betrayed a vulnerability so profound it made the rangers' hearts tighten. Every inhalation was shallow, every tremor an urgent plea, yet there was no frantic noise, no overpowering panic, only a raw, delicate life clinging to the edge. The grass around them whispered, bending over the fragile form of the cub, providing shelter in its own way. Dust motes rose in the sunlight, catching the heat of the day, while the breeze carried the faint scent of wildflowers and distant watering holes. The ranger crouched lower, extending a hand slowly, palm open, fingers relaxed, a gesture of non-threatening intent. The cub's small body twitched as it sniffed the air, curiosity and instinct mingling with fear. Its legs, too weak to stand, collapsed beneath it again and again, a reminder of its fragility. Yet in its trembling there was persistence, a flicker of strength in the softness of its cry. They waited, not forcing, not overwhelming, allowing the cub to set the pace of its tentative acceptance. Each soft step forward from the ranger was met with a cautious nuzzle, each careful breath mirrored by the cub's hesitant exhale. The wind carried the faint cry further across the savannah, mingling with the distant calls of adult lions, the low hum of insects and the gentle rustling of leaves, creating a symphony of life that emphasized both isolation and connection. The cub's body sagged again as it sought warmth and reassurance, leaning toward the extended hand, pressing tiny paws into dust as if testing the presence of care. Time seemed to stretch, measured only by the slow rhythmic rise and fall of its chest. In that quiet, fragile space, there was no rush, only the profound understanding of life's precariousness and the quiet determination to protect it. The ranger's gaze remained soft, attentive, honoring the vulnerability before them. The cub trembled once more, then nestled slightly closer, a tentative trust forming in the silence. The golden grass swayed around them, a gentle, protective shroud, and the wind carried a sense of fragile hope, delicate as the tiny life it had touched. The cub huddled closer to the rangers, its small body barely rising with each shallow breath, the tremors in its limbs continuing without pause. The morning sun had climbed higher, warming the tall grasses but doing little to ease the fatigue pressing down on the tiny creature. Every sound in the distance seemed magnified in the quiet field. The rustle of leaves, the faint flutter of a bird's wings, even the soft hiss of wind weaving through the stalks. Then another sound reached them, low and resonant, carrying over the plain with a weight that made the rangers stiffen instinctively. A deep roar, echoing across the savannah, vibrating through the soil and air, drew their attention immediately. It was not one roar, but several, layered and commanding, signaling presence, strength, and territory. The cub's head lifted slightly, ears pivoting, body tensing as the vibrations of its father's voice reached it. Its wide, uncertain eyes searched the grasses, nose twitching, nostrils flaring at the unfamiliar but familiar scent carried on the wind. The rangers froze, holding their breath, knowing instinctively that the pride might be near, their protective gaze scanning the horizon beyond the waving stems. The initial fear in the cub's small body seemed to mingle with recognition, an instinctive memory embedded deeper than any human understanding could touch. It whimpered softly, almost questioning, then nestled closer to the warmth of the ranger's hands, seeking steady reassurance while the unknown presence of its kin drew nearer. Through the grass, a subtle shift in movement hinted at the pride's approach. Shadows elongated as the sun struck the landscape, revealing the muscular shapes of lions weaving through the tall stems, deliberate and careful. The rangers remained motionless, hearts quickened but bodies calm, giving space for the wild, for the family to emerge naturally. The cub's tail flicked nervously, brushing against the dirt, its small claws digging faintly into the ground, betraying both fear and anticipation. Each low growl and rumble from the distance vibrated through the air, confirming the ranger's suspicion. This was no abandoned cub. It was waiting for family, for guidance, for a reconnection that had been interrupted. One ranger exhaled slowly, voice just above a whisper, "You're almost there," as if acknowledging both the cub's struggle and the unseen reunion approaching. The wind shifted again, carrying scents of earth, musk and fur, delicate yet unmistakable. The cub lifted its head, nose twitching furiously, scanning the golden sea of grass, eyes wide, reflecting both vulnerability and cautious hope. Its tiny limbs twitched, trying to push forward, yet the exhaustion weighed heavier than any instinct to move. In the distance, a large male lion's silhouette became apparent, powerful and deliberate, his mane catching the sunlight, each step purposeful yet unhurried. Another, smaller figure, perhaps a sibling or part of the extended pride, moved alongside him, bodies low and measured, surveying the field before closing the distance. The cub's small whimpers shifted to short, soft cries, a call that matched the rhythm of the ranger's steady, watchful presence. The ranger's eyes met briefly, understanding the gravity of the moment. What had seemed like abandonment was only a temporary separation, a fragile pause in the natural order of pride and kinship. The grasses swayed gently around the trio, wind carrying the distant roars and soft cries together, a chorus of connection, expectation, and caution. The cub's tiny body pressed against the human's hands one last time, before shifting gaze toward the approaching forms, the unsteady tremors now mingling with nascent hope. The scene hung in tense stillness, each heartbeat measured, every breath synchronized with the subtle, growing presence of family returning to claim its own. The cub's small frame stirred with hesitant energy, muscles trembling as it began to rise from the warmth of the ranger's hands. Each step was deliberate, cautious, as if testing the strength that had been nearly drained by hours of weakness and solitude. Its legs wobbled beneath it, one paw dragging slightly, leaving faint impressions in the dry soil, a subtle reminder of vulnerability amidst instinctual determination. The distant roars had softened, replaced by low murmurs of the pride moving slowly through the grass, patient and watchful, their presence both reassuring and overwhelming. The rangers remained still, leaning slightly forward but refraining from touching, their hands hovering only to offer silent safety if the cub faltered too severely. The space between human and animal was delicate, a measured tension that honored the natural rhythm of reunion while keeping the fragile life secure. The cub's eyes flicked toward the approaching male, large and imposing even at a respectful distance. His golden mane shimmered in the sun, the strands shifting with each deliberate step, revealing a strength that contrasted sharply with the cub's fragile movements. The cub paused, head lowered, ears tilting back slightly, uncertainty mingling with instinctual recognition. Its body shifted forward again, one small paw placed in front of another, yet the slight limp in its rear leg betrayed the toll of its isolation and exhaustion. Each step drew a soft, tentative whine from its throat, barely audible above the rustle of grasses, a sound of both longing and caution. The male lion's eyes met the cub's, unblinking, surveying yet patient. A low, rumbling growl issued from deep within his chest, not a threat, but a gentle acknowledgement of awareness, guiding without command. The cub continued its slow approach, pausing frequently to adjust balance, resting briefly against the warmth of the earth. Its tail flicked nervously with each tentative movement, brushing against dry blades, sending small clouds of dust into the air. The ranger's breath matched the rhythm of the moment, slow and steady, allowing the cub to rely on instinct rather than intervention. Occasionally, one hand extended lightly, hovering behind the cub's body to catch it if it stumbled, but never pressing forward, never forcing motion. "Careful now," a ranger murmured softly, voice a calm thread weaving through the tense air. The cub responded only with a subtle shift, ears twitching, but continued onward, guided by the faint gravity of family rather than human persuasion. Around them, the savannah remained alive yet unobtrusive. The golden grasses swayed in a steady rhythm, carrying scents of musk, earth, and sun-warmed fur. Shadows of larger lions passed overhead, elongated in the mid-morning sun, measuring their distance, patience clear in the fluidity of each movement. The cub's head bobbed slightly with effort, every step a negotiation between instinct and weakness. Its small, trembling form brushed against the father's foreleg at last, a moment of tentative contact that sent a shiver through its tiny frame. The male lowered his massive head slightly, nudging with gentle pressure, confirming presence without overwhelming. The reunion progressed with quiet deliberation, a slow convergence of life and instinct, weakness and strength. The cub leaned into the guidance, yet retained a careful distance, the limp dictating the pace. Every subtle gesture from the pride communicated acceptance, every sway of the grasses echoed patience. Human presence remained almost invisible, a shadow of assurance, allowing the natural process to unfold with reverent observation. In that stillness, life continued its delicate balance, a fragile trust restored step by cautious step, the bond between father and offspring reasserted not through urgency, but through gentle, unwavering attention. The cub nestled closer to its father, small body pressed against the warmth and solidity of his side, trembling with residual weakness from hours of struggle. The golden grasses swayed lazily in the gentle wind, yet beneath their calm surface, the subtle tension of the savannah began to stir. Distant movements, too faint at first to discern, rippled through the tall stalks. A faint rustle, the subtle crunch of leaves underfoot, a low, intermittent growl far across the plain. The father's massive frame stiffened instantly, muscles coiling with quiet alertness, mane bristling in subtle response to the distant disturbance. His amber eyes, focused and calculating, scanned the horizon with a depth of vigilance born from years of survival, each motion precise, protective. The cub trembled, sensing the shift in the air, lifting its small head with a faint, uncertain whine, body quivering as instinct and exhaustion collided. The father lowered his head, letting out a low rumble, deep and resonant, a signal both of reassurance to the cub and warning to unseen intruders. The sound reverberated through the dry soil and bending grass, a declaration of presence and authority. The cub struggled to lift its tiny legs, one paw dragging as weakness weighed heavily, yet the proximity to his father lent courage, however fragile. Its tail flicked nervously, brushing against dry earth, ears tilting back as it listened to the layered chorus of distant predators, hyenas, jackals, perhaps a wandering leopard. Each faint sound set the father's senses alight, a constant scanning of the surrounding landscape, every step measured to position himself between the cub and potential danger. The rangers remained still, holding their breath, hands low and relaxed, watching as the natural rhythms of protection and survival unfolded without intrusion. The cub's small whimpers punctuated the tense air, a fragile voice barely audible against the rustle of the grass. Its eyes, large and glistening, scanned the horizon, following the subtle movements of its father, drawing courage from his steady presence. Each tentative step forward required concentrated effort, legs quivering, shoulders sagging, muscles weak from fatigue. The father nudged the cub gently, encouraging motion while remaining poised to defend, his massive paws pressing lightly against the soil as if claiming the ground. The cub stumbled slightly, tail brushing the dirt, claws scraping faintly, yet with each faltering step, it inched closer to safety, guided by instinct and the quiet support of the massive presence beside it. Above them, the wind shifted, carrying scents of predators, earth, and the faint aroma of sun-warmed grasses. Shadows stretched across the landscape, a reminder of the vast expanse in which danger could emerge unnoticed. The father's low, rumbling growls punctuated the stillness, each one measured, deliberate, reinforcing boundaries without panic. The cub's head lifted briefly, ears twitching at each distant call, eyes wide with both fear and recognition, struggling to process the new signals while battling exhaustion. The ranger's soft breaths mirrored the rhythm of the savannah, blending into the quiet observation, giving the cub and its protector space to navigate the tense environment naturally. Time seemed to stretch in slow, fragile intervals. Every tremor, every cautious movement carried weight, every whispered rumble of the father offered both guidance and reassurance. The cub leaned closer, pressing tiny paws against the solid flank of the adult, a delicate negotiation between dependence and instinctual perseverance. The grasses swayed around them, wind whispering across the plain, and for a moment, despite the distant stirrings of predators, there was a fragile equilibrium, a balance of vigilance, weakness, and protective strength, held in quiet, tense harmony. The first rays of late afternoon filtered through the tall savanna grasses, casting warm streaks across the earth where the cub now stood, small but steadier, muscles gradually regaining strength. Its limbs, once trembling uncontrollably, now held with more purpose, each pawfall deliberate as it tested the solidity of the ground beneath. The father remained close, a towering presence of calm vigilance, his golden mane catching the sunlight with a subtle sheen, eyes constantly scanning the horizon even as he nudged the cub gently forward. There was no urgency in his movements, only a measured, patient guidance, a quiet insistence that the cub follow when it could. Slowly, the fragile hesitation of earlier hours began to dissolve, replaced by tentative confidence, the instinct to walk, to keep pace with family, drawing the little body forward despite lingering weakness. The cub lifted its head, whiskers brushing against the dust, nose twitching at the myriad scents carried on the wind, dry earth, sun-baked grasses, and the unmistakable musk of its pride not far ahead. Its eyes, once wide with uncertainty, now reflected a cautious determination, flickering toward the distant shapes of the adult lions moving with familiar rhythm. One paw dragged slightly, a reminder of the earlier struggle, but each step drew the cub closer to the warmth, the security of family, and the invisible thread of trust between it and its father. The rangers observed quietly, hands lowered, breath slow and steady, giving the wild space to reclaim its natural flow while maintaining a shadow of assurance should the cub falter. "That's it," one whispered softly, the words more a note of acknowledgement than instruction. The cub responded only with a small, unsteady nudge forward, ears flicking, tail swishing in tentative rhythm, energy returning gradually. The father moved beside the cub with unhurried care, massive paws pressing softly into the soil, each step a silent statement of presence, of protection, of guiding strength without interference. He occasionally lowered his head, gently nudging the cub with warm pressure, reinforcing trust with quiet, instinctual gestures rather than noise or force. The cub leaned into him, brushing its tiny body against his flank, drawing courage from his steady heat. Around them, the golden grasses swayed lazily, dust motes catching in the shafts of sunlight, the faint hum of insects and distant calls of the pride threading through the air, carrying an understated rhythm of life returning to its natural course. Gradually, the silhouettes of the pride became clearer, adult lions moving with measured purpose, some lounging in the shade, others stretching before settling again, all radiating calm authority. The cub's small steps quickened slightly, confidence building with each cautious stride, limbs regaining fluidity as exhaustion lifted further. The father's watchful eyes never wavered, occasionally glancing down to ensure the cub remained steady, guiding without imposing, encouraging without interference. The bond, forged through the tension of vulnerability and protection, now manifested in the subtle synchronization of movement. One body following instinct, the other guiding without intrusion. As they approached the pride, the cub paused for a fleeting moment, sniffing the air, whiskers twitching, tail flicking with tentative excitement. The father nudged gently, and together they stepped into the open where family awaited, the subtle reunion unmarked by sound, yet profound in its quiet grace. The rangers watched from a respectful distance, the savannah stretching around them, golden grasses rippling softly in the breeze, a serene closure to hours of fragility, vigilance, and trust. The cub's tiny body, now stronger, pressed briefly against its father, and the adult lions acknowledged the return with calm acceptance, the quiet triumph of survival and protection carried in measured, natural gestures. The wind swept gently across the field, brushing the tips of grasses and carrying the distant, muted calls of the pride, sunlight lingering warmly on the savannah as the cub and its father melted into the movement of family, the delicate arc of trust and care now restored.